When I was a kid, one of my favorite things to do was listen to records. This was the late 1970s, and besides radio programs, records and 8-tracks were prevalent forms of entertainment media to listen to at home. I did listen to music albums, but I particularly loved comedy records. I listened to the Smothers Brothers, George Carlin, Monty Python, Steve Martin, Bill Cosby. I also listened a lot to an album made by a man named Eddie Lawrence. It was called Is That What's Bothering You, Bunky? It featured several comedy skits with Mr. Lawrence providing all the voices of different wacky characters interacting with each other. But there was one character in particular that Eddie Lawrence is always remembered for to this day, the Old Philosopher. We're going to take a look at the life and rise of Eddie Lawrence as a poet, actor, performer, and comedian, and how he came to be primarily known and remembered as the Old Philosopher. Eddie Lawrence was born Lawrence Eisler in 1919 in Brooklyn, New York. He first gained small notoriety as a young man performing free verse in small clubs around town. His bizarre and whimsical delivery stood out to the audiences he performed for. For those who don't know, free verse is a style of poetry that doesn't follow any pre-established style or pattern. For those who are fans of Mike Myers, this sort of open mic poetry was portrayed in his movie So I Married an Axe Murderer. In 1956, Eddie Lawrence recorded a comedy album which featured his now famous character, the Old Philosopher. For those who are unfamiliar with the Old Philosopher, it would typically go something like this. Accompanied by an accordion rendition of Beautiful Dreamer, the character would start out with a downtrodden and calming voice, wherein he begins to talk about a series of wacky and implausible misfortunes. After this was done, cymbals would crash, and he would then burst into a loud, boisterous, encouraging voice over a brassy rendition of the national anthem. He would then speak words of encouragement, and typically end with a comic punchline. Having explained that premise out loud to you, that formula doesn't seem all that enticing, or that it should even really work at all as a comedy skit. But Lawrence's emotion, timing, and skill at doing voices made it all work. Audiences loved the character, and Eddie became something of a minor celebrity. In 1960, after the success of the Old Philosopher character, Eddie went on to do voice work in cartoons, providing voices in 13 different animated theatrical shorts for Paramount's subsidiary company, Famous Studios. He also wrote many of the stories for those theatrical shorts. Famous Studios eventually closed its doors in 1967, as the fall of the theatrical cartoon was in full effect. He did, however, come back in 1994 in 2 episodes of Garfield and Friends, providing the voice for the feline philosopher, a parody of his own creation, the Old Philosopher. Because the Old Philosopher character was popular with children and adolescent boys, Eddie was given a chance in 1963 to host a local children's television show in New York. Around this same time, Lawrence also wrote the book and lyrics for a dark comic musical called Kelly. The premiere of Kelly began on February 1st, 1965, and although it did get some good reviews, it famously closed the same night it opened on February 6th due to many controversies with the producers who demanded widespread drastic changes, in which Eddie pushed back on. After Kelly, Eddie went back to performing in clubs until he joined the Broadway musical Sherry, where he performed the role of the character Banjo. He also went on to appear in a few films in minor roles, though mostly these have been forgotten about. 30 years after the debut of his Bunky album in 1994, Eddie Lawrence recorded another album. Titled The Jazzy Philosopher, it reconstituted his Old Philosopher character and proved that Lawrence hadn't lost his comedic touch, as it was well received by the public. Eddie Lawrence died on March 25, 2014, at the age of 95. Growing up, I listened to the album Is That's What's Bothering You, Bunky, over and over. I loved it. His comedic timing, silly voices, and writing were a joy to listen to, and it's no wonder that people loved his Old Philosopher character. Today's generations may not know who Eddie Lawrence was, but to older folks like myself, he's embedded as a cherished memory of a time when the world was simpler. When people spoke face to face, went outdoors to hang out with friends, and when a simple record player could liven our spirits each night when we needed a laugh. The answer to the question of what's bothering us, Bunky, is the fact that comedians like Eddie Lawrence are no longer still around. I'm Triceratops, and I hope you enjoyed this short look at a comedic legend, Eddie Lawrence.